Good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. As Sunday said, my name's Caroline. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I'll be with you for about an hour this evening. If we can just do a quick sound check, if you can just give me a little hello in the chat or a little thumbs up or something, just so I know you can hear me. I'm not talking to myself. If I can just know that you can hear me, that'd be fantastic. Or just unmute yourselves and just say good evening, just so I know that you're there. Okay. Just have to assume that you, oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Someone can hear me. Absolutely brilliant. So welcome. Today is going to be a bit of an introduction to PowerPoint, to be honest to you. We're not going to get into too much complication or nitty gritty today. I know you're all on mute. You can feel free to unmute yourself if you would prefer, because you're absolutely welcome to ask questions, or you can use the chat function if you prefer to ask any questions that way, whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen just so we can look at a few bits before we move into the actual training. Okay. So I've just got a few sort of domestics. So if you want, this is going to be an hour long. If you need to get a little drink or something to help you through, a little cup of tea, I highly recommend it. Make yourself comfortable. This is not school, you know, we're nice and relaxed. If you need a little break, that's fine. Just pop away and come back straight to me just so I know you're back with me. This is your chance to ask questions. It's your learning opportunity. So if I've said something or one of the other delegates had said something and we want to have a bit of a discussion about it, that's absolutely fine. You know, feel free to join in, to have a little think about it. And we'll always listen to each other's thoughts and opinions and always show that respect for everybody. As I say, we'll be finished around the 9 o'clock mark today. So we'll be here for about an hour. And this for me is the most important thing. It's all about those questions for me. There's no such thing as a silly question. Feel free to ask away. Like I say, if you don't want to do it through your microphone, that is not a problem at all. Type it in the chat if you're a bit more comfortable doing that way, or private message me on Zoom. That's not a problem. But just don't go away from these sessions with that burning question. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have as we go along. Okay. So let's get started with our PowerPoint. So we're just going to look today at the basics, to be honest. We're not going to get anything too sort of complicated. We can make it more complicated as we go along. But let's just start right at the beginning. So what I've done here is I've opened a PowerPoint presentation. So that's what we use PowerPoint for. We use it to make presentations. So you can email those as attachments to people, or more often than not, you might have them sort of on your laptop or on a big screen, and you might be presenting information to a lot of people. It's easier to do it that way sometimes when you've got a lot of people, because you can talk, but it can be exhausting, and it can be exhausting for those listening. Sometimes it's really helpful to have that big graphic, that big visual on a screen that someone can look at as well as look at you while you're doing that talking. Or you can do it as we're doing here and have it on a screen and do it remotely and talk over the top. So there's loads of great uses for PowerPoint, and it's a fantastic tool. It really is. The key to any good PowerPoint is to keep it nice and simple. Don't need to overcomplicate it. It doesn't need to be all singing, all dancing, all frills, bells and whistles. It can be as simple as you make it. So long as you've got that information in there, that's the most important thing. So what we're going to work at during these courses is how to get the information into our PowerPoints. We'll touch a little bit on design and how you can get different elements of design in there, but we're not going to focus too heavily on that. You know, I'm not a graphic designer, but I can show you how to use PowerPoint. So we're just going to look at this screen. This is the first screen that we'll see when we're using PowerPoint. All I've done is open up a blank presentation. So I've double clicked on the icon and this is what it's brought up. If we look down this left-hand side where we see the number 1 and a white box with a red box around it, these are what we call slides. So you think of slides as pages in a book. If your PowerPoint presentation is the book, as you flick through those pages, different information will show on screen. So we can add as many slides as we want, and we'll go through how to do that a little bit later on. But this is our first screen, our first slide. It's our title slide. So you can see there's a couple of boxes on the screen that I can say click to add title. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the title of my presentation. Remember, this is the first thing that the viewers are going to see. So you really want to get your point across. You want to say exactly what this is about so that anyone watching is going to sit there and think, yeah, I'm absolutely in the right place. This presentation's for me. So it's quite user-friendly as PowerPoint. And you can't go too wrong. I'll show you a handy little undo key as well. So if you do something wrong, you can always undo and redo it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to add our title. And using our cursor, we're going to click in that box. You see the text has disappeared, and now I've got that flashing cursor icon that means I can type. So I'm just going to type in there, Introduction to PowerPoint. You'll notice there, as I typed, the text has fit to that box. So as big as that box is, that's how big that text will be on screen. If I click off there, you'll see the box disappears. So your viewers won't see that box. That's just a guide for you in this editing phase. And I might want to add underneath, you see I can click to add a subtitle. So this is what my PowerPoint's about. It's an introduction to PowerPoint. So in there, I might want to put a step-by-step guide on creating presentations. And again, if I click off there, you see that box has disappeared and it's just left me with that plain slide. You'll notice underneath PowerPoint, there's a wiggly sort of wavy red line. That's because it's highlighted a spelling mistake. So one of the most fantastic things about PowerPoint is that it checks your spelling and your grammar for you. There's nothing worse. I'm sure you guys have been in the situation when someone's put up this brilliant slide, all this information, and they've spelt something wrong. So what we do in this instance is just hover over it, and rather than use the left-hand button on our mouse, we'd use the right. And you see there, it's come up with different suggestions that I might want to change it to. In this instance, I'm going to use that top one. So I'm just going to click that and it changed it for me. So you can see there, that's my first slide, my first page of the book, if you want. So this screen here is what we're going to call our editing screen. So this is what we see as creators of PowerPoint. So as I'm making my PowerPoint presentation, I'm putting all my information in there. This is what I work from. So I can see the edit, I can see the file, I can see the save, all these different things. But your viewers won't be able to see this. When you're presenting this information, put your cursor right to the top of the screen and you'll notice above where it says design and insert, there's a small icon and it says start from beginning. If I hover over it, this is our presentation mode. So this screen here that I'm looking at the moment is our edit mode. If I go up there and click on this button that says start from beginning, then that's my present mode. So if I'm presenting this to some learners, maybe to some colleagues, possibly in a job interview, something like that, then this is the screen that your viewers will see. So it's just a bit neater and you don't have to worry about all the file save, all that bits around it. To get out of this view screen, just press escape and it brings you back to that edit screen. So there are two views. You've got edit, which is this one here, which is what I will use as the creator to put my information into my slides. And you've got the present, which is that one there, which is when you finish your PowerPoint and you want to show it to your viewers, you're going to use that present mode so that they can see this. And to get out of that present mode back into your edit screen, just use your escape key in the top corner of your keyboard. Okay, so we're all happy with that. One thing we can do here on this first screen is we can change things like the size of the letters if we want to. We can change the font, so sort of the kind of lettering that we've used. So if I use my cursor to highlight. So I'm going to click, hold, and highlight all that. You'll see this new box come up. So this where it says Calibri light, and there's a drop down arrow. They're all my different font styles. So what does the text look like that's on the page? So if you click that drop down arrow, these are all the different fonts that you could perhaps use. So if you want to make things a bit more interesting, you can pick any of these. One word of caution is think about your viewers. So always think about the people who are going to read this from a screen. There are some brilliant fonts, but if you pick something like this, as beautiful as that is, that's not always the most clear, especially if you're in a room of maybe 10, 20 people. If you're at the back of that room, reading that text that's on the screen is quite difficult. So what might be better is picking something maybe not as beautiful, but is a little bit easier for your learners or your viewers to read. So I'm just going to pick Arial just because it's nice and straightforward. Best practice as well, if you've got multiple text, so more than one lot of writing on the screen, make them all the same font. Okay, if you make 2 different fonts, for instance, looking at that from a viewer point of view, it's just a little bit disjointed. It doesn't flow nicely, and it just makes it a little bit more difficult to read. You want to make it as simple as you can for the people that are viewing your PowerPoint. You want to be able to get your point across really quickly and really easily. So you want to make it as simple for that person to read as you can. You'll notice as I make changes, I keep referring up and keep clicking back on this presentation mode. What's really important as you build a PowerPoint is to keep looking at this screen and seeing it as the viewers would see it. So keep just having a look at the general design. Does it look is it quite readable? Is it quite legible? Is it easy to see the information? If I sit in front of this screen, do I know exactly what's going on that slide, on that page of the book? Here, yeah, I do. So just keep where you need to, looking back into that presentation mode. So that's how we change our font or the text that we've got on the screen. So I click, I drag and highlight, and then using this button here, I select whichever font I need. I'm going to stick with Arial, I think. You see the button next to it? Then that's going to change the size of our font. So make it bigger, make it smaller. So we are on 60 at the moment. If I make it to 80, you can see it's made it that little bit bigger. You'll notice next to where it says 80, there's a increase and decrease. If you just want to make it a little bit smaller, you can use those, or a little bit bigger. Do exactly the same with this. So you've got a couple of options. You click and drag like that, or sometimes simpler, just double click and it'll highlight it all. And then you can make those changes to the size this way, or you can use your big or your smaller ones like that. So we've looked at how we change our font, and we've looked at how we change the size of that font. Possibly another thing you might want to do is maybe underline. And that's as simple as clicking on that U with an underline. And if you hover over something, you're not quite sure what it does, it'll always tell you before you click it. So I'm going to underline that because I think it's a title, it needs an underline. So I mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, there is an undo key. So you might look at that and think, oh, actually, I don't want to underline it. If I move my cursor up to the top of the screen, just left of that present mode, you'll see this button here, which is looks like a backwards facing arrow. That's my undo key. If I click that once, it undoes the last thing that I did on that screen. So in this case, it's undone that underline. So that's not necessarily that important when you're doing something like underlining. But imagine if I suddenly deleted that. I didn't mean to delete that. I've just pressed the wrong button and I've deleted it. That's where this undo key is going to come in really useful. Press undo and it's back. I've saved myself. Thank goodness. So one other thing that we need to be able to do with our PowerPoints is obviously we need to be able to save them. So either you might work on them for a little bit, save it, open it back up the next day, or once it's finished, you're obviously going to want to save it. So that's what that icon there is, the save button. Looks like a little floppy disk. I know floppy disks, we don't really do them anymore, but that's what that is. So you just click that save button, decide where you want it saving, and pop your title in there and press save. Okay, so it's always a good idea to save it regularly, just so that you don't do an hour's work on your presentation, for instance, and all of a sudden it's disappeared, you know, technological failure. You'll see in the top left, I've got a function called auto save, and I always have that toggled to on so that if I do forget to hit that save button, it saves it periodically for me, so I'm not in too much of a panic. So to turn it off, I'd just click that, and to turn it on, just there. Okay, so we've looked at here, we've looked at that present mode, we've looked at our undo key, we've looked at save, and we've looked at auto save. We're also happy with how to change the font using that drop down there, and we've looked at how to change the size, which is that there, and you've also got your incremental increase and decrease. So if you just want to take it up just a little bit or down just a little bit, you'd use those there. We've looked at underline, your italic, and your bold button. Okay, so it's entirely up to you when you use these. It's entirely up to you what font size, what font you have, but always just think of that present mode. And just think of those viewers that you're going to have of this presentation. Think of those people who are going to be seeing that screen, and just make it as easy as you can for them to take all that information in. A simpler design is always going to be preferable to a more jazzy design, if you will. Okay, anyone, any questions so far? Are we all okay so far? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to and ask any questions. I know we've not covered a great deal. Okay.
I'm just joining in, but as we go along, if I have any questions, then I'll ask.
Yeah,
So
fantastic. Yeah, feel free to shout them out. Yeah, definitely.
Right,
no problem. Welcome. Okay, so we've done our title. We've done our title slide, our title page of the book. It's time to start putting some meat on the bones. Start making some more slides. So we can add as many slides, as many pages to the book as we want. It's really simple to do. This is slide number 1 on the left-hand side. If I move my cursor down into the grey space underneath, I'm going to use my right click on my mouse, and you can see you've got a couple of options. You've got a new slide, you've got a reuse slide. What I'm going to select is new slide, and that adds me in a blank slide. Click on any one of these, and it takes me automatically to that slide. So I've got an option to click and add a title, click and add text. So this title of this slide is going to be, how do I save my work? And in that text, I'm going to pop, click save icon, or use autosave function. So here it's automatically put in bullet points because it thinks I want to write a list. And that's fine if I do want to write a list, but you might want to put a sort of a paragraph in there. So you just need to use this button here. So let's go through some of these buttons that we're seeing. So the first one we're going to look at is this bullet point one here. So you can see as I move my cursor along, this bullet point one here. So this is where I would create a bulleted list if I wanted to. Okay, so if I click that, it takes those bullet points away. Oh, change my mind actually. I'm thinking I would like a list. I might just put those bullets back in for me. If you want to get a bit fancy, use your drop down arrow and you can change the kind of bullet points that you want. So you can have something a bit fancier if you prefer, but again, entirely your choice. It might be that you want to do numbered steps, and that's where that next icon comes in. So this is 1, 2, 3. So number 1 might be move cursor to icon, hit enter, click save icon. You see the difference. I've got bullet points, which is absolutely fine. It might be that you want to use numbers, and as you hit enter, it automatically changes that number for you. And that's how we do it. How do I change the font and the size of this? Exactly the same as you did on the previous page. So you've got your options here. You've got your size there and your up and down size. Bold, italic, underline, exactly as you did on the previous page. So nothing's changed between one slide and the next. One thing we are going to look at, excuse me, is if I highlight this, I'm going to get rid of all these bullet points. We're going to look at what's called justification of the text. So you'll see the text here is all down the left-hand side, just as it would be if you were handwriting, you'd always start to that left-hand side. You can change that if you would like to. So you can center it, you can write it, or you can full justify. So it might be that you want it in the middle like that. Oh, excuse me. Just click that middle button. It just moves it into the middle. Again, it's entirely your choice. Whatever you think would work best for your presentation, but you can do it that way if you want. So your title slide is center justified, and so is this. Click, drag, and highlight, and actually, I would like it to the left. It makes a bit more sense to the left for me. I'm going to leave that in the middle though because it's a title. I've done a little bit of work, so I'm going to hit that save button just so it doesn't undo itself. And now I've made a couple of slides, a couple of pages to my book. I'm going to look at this presenter view. So there's my title page. To skip to the next page, I'm just going to use the arrow key on my keyboard and I'm going to look at that. So that's what my viewers, my learners in this instance, are seeing. And I'm just using my left key to go back and my right key to go forward. To get out of this presenter view, back to that edit screen, I'm going to hit that escape key. So it takes me back to this edit screen. Just because I'm working on slide number 2 here, which I've called How Do I Save My Work, it doesn't mean that I can't go back and edit slide number 1. So if I think, I'd actually quite like to change this up a little bit, it might be that I want to just remove that step by step and call it a how to. Then I can still do that. I don't have to work on absolutely everything in order. It could be that you get sort of a rough plan of slides and then go back and fill in that detail afterwards. That's absolutely fine. PowerPoint allows you to do that. So let's add one more slide to this presentation. So again, underneath the slides that I already have, I'm going to right click in the gray space and I'm going to add a new slide. This time, I don't want any text. I'm just going to have some pictures so we can insert pictures into this. So what I want to do is get rid of both of these boxes here. If I hover my cursor over the dotted line, you can see it changes from a normal pointed arrow to one that's a cross with arrows on. And if I click once, the line changes from a dotted line into a solid line. Once the lines look like that solid line, you can then delete. So I could get rid of that box entirely if I wanted. These are called text boxes because, as we've learned, that's where the writing goes. But on this slide, we're not going to have any writing. We're just going to have some pictures. So you can see my dotted line, hover over, click once, so I've got that solid line, hit delete. And we're going to insert some pictures this time. So I've got a few options here. I can insert a picture that I've saved from my computer, and I can do some different things. So let's look through those. So along the top here, you can see File and Home. You'll see this button Insert. So I'm going to click Insert. Underneath that, just a little bit to the right, is Pictures. So if I click that, I've got a few different options. So this device, this would be a picture that I have saved to my computer. So if you were doing perhaps a work presentation and you'd taken a photo of something brilliant that you'd seen at work or that you'd done at work, maybe a successful project, and you'd save that picture to your computer, then that's how you'd insert that. You'd click this device, and then you can upload any pictures that you have on your computer and pop them into your presentation. My next one's what's called a stock image. So stock images are pictures, photos, images that are preloaded into PowerPoint that you can use for nothing. So the rules around using pictures are quite specific. If you go into a search engine, for example, Google, and you search picture of cat, there's probably, I dread to think how many, 10 million pictures of cats. All those pictures are owned by somebody. So you can't just take them, put them in your presentation and use them as your own. So what you need to use is either a picture that is definitely yours that you have taken, or you can use one of these stock images. You can see I could use that picture of cat. Click it and you'll notice there's a little tick in the corner. Move down to this insert in brackets 1 and just click insert. And there's picture of cat. If you look at the picture closely, you can see around the edge, there's a series of white circles. These are what we use to resize the picture. So it could be that I want that cat picture that big, but it could be that actually I want it a bit small. It's just a picture of something that I'm trying to demonstrate. So I'm going to use this top corner circle here. You'll notice if I hover over it using my cursor, it goes from a pointed cursor, hover over the circle, it goes to a diagonal arrow. If I click and hold, whoops, and then drag my mouse down, you can see the picture is getting smaller and smaller. So I resize it that way. Okay, so that's how I'm going to resize my picture. I think that big is probably how big I want it. But I don't want it here. I want it up in this top left corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my cursor again. You'll see it goes from a pointed cursor, like an arrow, into that cross with points on that we've seen before. So if I click and drag, then I can just move that picture wherever I want. And that's where I want that picture, I think. I'd like it there. Looking at that, I've just got an unexplained picture of a cat. I might want to put a little bit more text in thinking about it. So what I need to do now is put one of those text boxes back in that we used before. So using my insert button again, I'm going to go all the way along to text box there. And if you hover over it, you'll see it says draw a text box. You can draw one anywhere. I'm just going to click it once. Move my cursor down. You can see it's made a different sort of cross, looks a bit like a sword. I'm going to click and drag. And you see this box that it's making here. This is my text box. So that enables me to be able to write. So this is a picture of my cat buttons. So that's enabled me to pop some text in there. Just as we did before, I can change the font. So what the text looks like, what sort of lettering it is. I can change the size, make it slightly bigger, make it slightly smaller. I can make it bold. I can underline it. Any of those things that I want to do. We can also change the color of the font of the text. So it's automatically going to make all the text a black, which is fine. You might want to change it up. You might want to maybe use red, blue, whichever you want. That's how you do it there. Okay. So you've got all these different colors here to choose from. I'm just going to leave it just as standard for now. So let's go back into present view and look what we've got. So we've got our title page. Using my across arrow, I've got my next slide, and you can see my slide there. To get out of that present view, back to the edit view, I'm just going to use the escape key. So I'm going to add one more slide in. So underneath the 3 that I've already got, hover over the grey space, right click, and I'm going to say new slide. So our next title that I'm going to add is how to add a slide in PowerPoint. I'm going to double click that so it's all highlighted. I'm going to make it center justified using this button here so that the text sits in the middle of the slide as opposed to just to the left. I'm going to click in this box and add text, and I don't want bullet points. I want to make them numbered. So I'm going to do numbered instructions for this one. So I'm going to use this button here, this numbers button. So step 1 would be move cursor to left of page. Step 2, move cursor to grey area. And step 3, right click on mouse. Step 4, oops, can't spell, select new slide option. Fabulous. So I'm quite happy with that. That's my next slide. But you know, it's looking pretty dull. I'm going to add a little bit of a picture in here. So back up to my insert, pictures, and there's some online pictures so I can Google again. But remember what we said about ownership of pictures, so just be really careful. I'm not going to use a stock image for this one. I don't have an appropriate photo on my device. So I'm going to use something called an icon. So if we scroll across to the right and I see this icon button. So these are all sorts of pictures, but they're very, very simple. So you can see them all here. And they're just really simple line drawings, cartoon effect almost. So sometimes these can be really, really effective if you're trying to get the point across, but you don't want too much complicated graphic. They're a really great way of representing something. So we were trying to add a new slide. So what we might put in here to search for is a mouse, because I was using my mouse to search for things. So click it once, get your tick there, move down to the insert and click insert. Oh, and there it is. Just as before with our picture of the cat, this might be in the wrong place. So I'm going to move my cursor over. I'm going to wait till I've got that cross there. I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to put it exactly where I want it. So I'm going to have it in that top corner there. It's also a little bit small for me. So just as I did before, I'm going to hover over one of these, this corner circle. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I've actually blocked off some writing there, so I'm just going to move it down a little bit. So you see what I mean about it being quite a simple representation, quite a simple way of putting a picture up there, but it's not too much picture, so it's nice and simple. If you look at the previous slide we had, that's quite a detailed picture. People are going to look at that picture as opposed perhaps to the text that's next to it, which is great if that's what you want. But if you're looking for instructions, you're possibly going to be better off with a simpler picture so that people's focus is on those instructions that you're trying to give. Okay, so that's inserting what we call an icon. So I move up to insert here and I move across to icon. And there's hundreds of them. You know, you can look at them all day. We won't go through them all today. It's probably something that you want to look at in your leisure. You'll notice as well next to icons there's something called cutout people. So it might be that you want to add in one of these people. That might be appropriate to the situation, to the presentation you're doing. For instance, if you were doing something about doctors, the NHS, something like that, you could use that picture of a doctor there and insert that. All your pictures are exactly the same. Just simply click on them till you see the box and use your corner circle to make them bigger and smaller. So you'll notice I keep using this corner here. That's because if I use this side one, it only changes the width of the picture. So look what happens. If I change that width, it's distorted that image. So it's not as good an image as it was before because I've distorted it sideways. So that would be an instance perhaps of when you wanted to use that undo key that we talked about. So go back to the top of the screen and use that backwards arrow, undo, and it just makes it that better image. Same with if I use this top one. It's obviously squashed our poor lady, so she no longer looks like the good image that she did. So I'm going to undo, undo. So if I want to resize an image, I'm always going to use these corners to resize them because they'll make them bigger both ways, both lengthways and widthways at the same time. So keeping that image, those proportions, just as it should be. I'm just going to delete that lady out of this slide. Okay, so I've got 4 slides here now. What I've decided actually is, before I get into how do I save my work and the nitty gritty of this PowerPoint, I'd quite like my button slide, my cat slide, to go beforehand. So I'm just going to change the order of the slides. I'm going to change the order of the books, the pages in the book. So it's really simple to do. Just hover over the slide, click and hold, and then just drag it up like that. And you'll notice they've just changed orders. So now if I go into my present mode, I've got my title first. I've got buttons. How do I save? And then I've got how do I add a slide? To get out of this back into edit view, we're just going to press escape again. On second thoughts, I've thought about it. This is a work presentation. Do I really want a picture of a cat and buttons in there? I'm going to delete that slide entirely. It's not that appropriate. So I'm just going to click on it once. So it's highlighted. You can see the red box around it. And I'm just going to click delete. You'll notice I've accidentally deleted 2 slides. So I'm just going to hit undo. Okay, so that's got rid of that slide entirely. You know what? It just wasn't appropriate, that picture of buttons. So now my presentation's going Introduction to PowerPoint. So that's my title. How do I save my work? And then how to add a slide in PowerPoint. And then escape back to that edit screen. Okay, so we're going to look a little bit more at this insert button because this is where we're going to get a lot of our functionality from. So we're going to make a new slide, a new page in our book. So remember, go to underneath the slides that you've made into this gray area, right click, new slide. I'm going to get rid of these text boxes because I don't want them. So I'm going to click once so that it goes from a dotted line to a solid line and press delete. I'm going to delete this one as well. So I move my cursor till it hovers over the line. I'm going to click it once and I'm going to press delete. So what I'm going to insert this time is some word art. So what I want to do is insert a different kind of text. So using my insert button, I inserted a text box last time. This time we're going to use some word art. So the best way to explain what word art is just by showing you. So I'm going to click it once. It comes up with all these different designs. So you'll notice some of maybe a shadow effect and different colors, different stripes. So I'm going to go for a diagonal stripe. In here, I'm going to write a new title, adding a piece of word art. So you see the difference. So this is a design piece. So I'm going to move that to the top of the screen. So if I had used a text box there, I could have said adding a piece of word art. I could have changed the size. I'll center justify it. I could change the color. Make it a little bit bigger still. But you see the difference between the two. This is a much more designed piece than this. So again, it's entirely up to you what you think would work best in your presentation. If this is going to be more appropriate, then certainly use your word art, insert, word art, pick your design. Alternatively, keep using your titles just as we have before. The thing with PowerPoint is it's entirely up to you as to what is going to be most appropriate. If you're doing a presentation for work that's all facts and figures and quite dry material, possibly using word art isn't the best way to go. You might just want to use a plain title because of that topic. If you're doing something a bit more fun, maybe introducing some games, some light refreshment, you're doing maybe a birthday presentation, something like that, maybe to go with a toast at someone's wedding, then that's where you probably are going to use something a bit more light-hearted, something a bit more creative than just a plain title. It's just about trying it and seeing what works for you. Keep referring back to that presenter screen and seeing what looks most appropriate. So we've looked at inserting pictures and we know what it means from this device. So that's our pictures that we've taken and saved to our computer. We've looked at some stock images and we know what online photos are. We've also looked at inserting icons, text boxes, and word art. We're also going to look at how to insert a shape. So as you would expect, this is how you would insert something like a circle, a square, but you also might want to insert something maybe, you can see here there's a lightning bolt, you can see there's some brackets, perhaps a triangle, there's a star, you might just want to draw an arrow. So you might put in, if we go back to our picture of our mouse that we had here, I'm saying right click on the mouse. To make that even easier for everybody to see, click on shapes, click on arrow. You can see I've got now, instead of my pointed arrow cursor, I've got a cross. If I click and drag, then that draws that arrow. So you can see it just points to it and just makes it really, really clear, really simple. I've decided I want that in a slightly different place. So just like you do with all your other pictures, hover over the arrow until you get that cross. Click, drag and hold. I'm going to move. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the mouse here. Now, I want the point of my arrow to be there and this end of my arrow to be over here. So I need to spin it round. So you see what I've done there. All I've done is clicked on it once, hovered over the circle here, and as well as making it longer and shorter, I can flip it entirely. So now it looks like that. With this arrow, I want to make it a bit thicker. I really want everyone to be able to see it. So I'm going to hover over it and I'm going to right click. And I'm going to use that outline and that weight function there. You see it's half a point to how thick it is. So I'm going to make it a 6 point. And that's made that really bold arrow there. It just makes it a little bit more clear as to what I'm talking about. So how to add a slide in PowerPoint. I've got a really simple picture of a mouse and I've got a really bold arrow so that everyone can see where I'm clicking. Another word that I've used in here is cursor. So it might be worth popping a picture of a cursor in there. So go into your insert and icons and let's see. if there's a cursor. Fantastic. And that you can pop underneath. Just in case then someone maybe isn't sure what I mean by cursor, well, there's a representation of it. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's all about just making everything as clear as you can for those learners, for those viewers. How can you make it really, really obvious what you're trying to talk about? The great thing about PowerPoint is you put the bare minimum in your slides and you do the talking, you do the explanation. But something that's difficult to describe, like a cursor or mouse buttons, you can just pop a really simple representation in there and that just demonstrates it a little bit better. So I'm going to delete that last slide that we popped in, and we're just going to take a look at our presentation that we've made today. So we've got our introduction to MS PowerPoint, a guide on how to create presentations. First, we've got how I save my work. Then I've got adding a slide in PowerPoint, and that's the end. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. We've got a couple of questions. So Kemi, what if you don't want to add a title to your new slide? Fantastic question. So I'll go back into screen share just so I can show you that. Bear with me. Okay, so what if I don't want to add a title? So I'm going to add a new slide. And where that box is dotted, I'm going to move my cursor over so it's that cross. I'm going to click it once so it's a solid line, and I'm just going to press delete. So you can keep the main body text box if you want. Alternatively, you can delete that as well, or you can keep it in, or you can keep them both in there. You can delete just that one, or you can delete them both. Entirely up to you. You don't have to have a title on there at all. You can just have a plain plain slide, sorry, if that works better for you. Okay, oh sorry, Kemi, I've realised you asked that question half an hour ago. I must get better with the chat. Must get better with the chat. So that's sort of that for this evening. So next week, what are we going to go into? We're going to look at how to make some of the graphics and the text appear at will. So you don't see it all at once. It comes up one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at how to insert some videos in there as well. So you might want to pop some videos and things like that in there. My best advice to you guys is to have a little play with what we've thought about today, what we've used today. Oh, no problem, Kemi, no problem at all. What's difficult to do sometimes is to watch someone do something and have a question, because sometimes you don't know what's unclear until you actually have a go yourself. I'm a big person, a big believer in learn by doing. So my best advice to you ahead of next week is have a little practice with what we've tried today. Have a little go at adding some slides, deleting some slides, reordering those slides, putting those titles on, putting some pictures and some icons in, and seeing what sort of comes unstuck, seeing what goes amiss. That didn't work quite as well as I would like it. And we can start next week with a few of those questions, get those out the way, and then move on to something and make it all look a bit more snaz, if that's okay with you guys. Is everyone all right with that as a plan for next week?